I placed the steaming tray of muffins on the countertop, the sweet scent of strawberry jam filling the air. Each muffin was crowned with a bright red cherry, glistening like a jewel. It was a ritual I had perfected over the years, one that had once filled my home with laughter and warmth. Back then, my husband would sit at the table, complimenting my baking with his smooth charm. He loved these muffins, or so he claimed, until I found out he loved other things too, things that didn't include the sanctity of our marriage. My chest tightened at the memory, but I quickly pushed it aside. Today wasn't about him. "Mom, are they ready yet?" My son, Ethan, called from the living room. His voice, filled with childlike eagerness, always melted my heart. At 17, he was a growing man with boundless energy and an appetite to match. "Just cooling," I called back, smiling despite myself. Ethan's love for these muffins had become a tradition, a small joy we shared. They were the one thing I could make that would light up his face, a reminder that some things, some relationships, remained untainted. As I arranged the muffins on a platter, Ethan appeared in the doorway. He leaned casually against the frame, his dark hair tousled, his easy grin making him look so much like his father that it hurt. But where my ex-husband's charm had hidden betrayal, Ethan's warmth was pure, unfiltered. "You're staring, Mom," he teased, snapping me out of my reverie. I laughed, handing him a plate. "Just wondering when you got so tall. Seems like yesterday you were a little boy with jam all over your face." "Still am, just taller," he quipped, grabbing a muffin. He took a bite, closing his eyes in exaggerated bliss. "Perfect as always." His words warmed me in ways I didn't expect. I busied myself with the dishes, but I could feel his eyes on me. Lately, Ethan had been hanging around more, talking with me about school, his plans for the future, even offering to help with chores. It was sweet, though sometimes I wondered if it was out of concern. Maybe he saw the loneliness I tried to hide, the gap my ex had left when he walked out of our lives. We spent the afternoon chatting about mundane things. Ethan told me about his friends, his classes, and how much he hated calculus. I teased him about his lack of culinary skills, and he promised to perfect the art of muffin making someday. It was comfortable, easy. But as the evening settled, a quiet tension began to seep into the air. It wasn't uncomfortable, just different. Ethan helped me clean up, his movements deliberate, his glances lingering a little longer than usual. I chalked it up to his thoughtful nature, but a part of me couldn't help but notice. Later, as I folded laundry in the living room, Ethan sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone. The silence was companionable until he broke it with a question I hadn't expected. "Mom," he started, his voice softer than usual, "do you ever think about, starting over?" I paused, a towel clutched in my hands. "Starting over?" "Yeah, like love and stuff." His cheeks reddened, and he quickly looked away. The question took me by surprise. I set the towel down and sat beside him. "Honestly, Ethan, I've thought about it. But it's not as simple as it sounds." He nodded, but his eyes were distant. "It's just, you deserve to be happy, Mom." My heart ached at his words. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means a lot." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken emotions hanging between us. I wanted to say more, to reassure him that I was okay, that I didn't need anyone else as long as I had him. But something about the way he looked at me made me pause. There was an intensity there, something tender and unguarded. I brushed it off, shaking my head at my own ridiculous thoughts. This was Ethan, my son, my anchor. He was just looking out for me, as any caring child would. But as I stood to leave, his voice stopped me. "Mom," he called, hesitation lacing his tone. I turned, my heart fluttering for reasons I didn't understand. "Yes." "Nothing," he said quickly, a shy smile tugging at his lips. "Just thanks. For everything." I smiled back, my chest tightening with a mix of pride and something I couldn't quite name. "Always, sweetheart." As I headed upstairs, the scent of strawberry muffins lingered in the air, a comforting reminder of the bond we shared. Whatever life threw our way, I knew one thing for sure. Ethan and I would always have each other. And that was more than enough. The first snow of the season fell softly outside, blanketing the world in pristine white. Inside, the warmth of the fireplace crackled, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Ethan and I had spent the morning pulling out boxes of Christmas decorations from the attic. The air smelled of pine and cinnamon, and holiday music hummed faintly in the background. "Careful with that," I chided gently, watching Ethan handle a fragile glass ornament shaped like a star. It was an heirloom from my mother, one of the few keepsakes I cherished. Ethan grinned, his dark eyes sparkling. "Relax, Mom. I've got it." He placed it on a high branch of the tree, stepping back to admire his work. "Looks good, doesn't it?" I nodded, smiling at his boyish enthusiasm. Decorating the house for Christmas had always been a family tradition, though it had changed over the years. Now it was just the two of us. "Perfect," I said, fluffing a strand of silver tinsel. "You've got an eye for this." "Must have inherited it from you," he said, his voice soft. His gaze lingered a moment longer than necessary, and I felt a warmth rise to my cheeks. I turned back to the tree, busying myself with the ornaments. Lately, I had noticed Ethan's compliments becoming more personal, more pointed. It wasn't just "Great dinner, Mom," or "You look nice today." It was deeper. His words dipped into admiration, his eyes holding a kind of reverence that left me feeling both flattered and flustered. The moments between us had shifted, like the lines of our relationship had blurred slightly, not enough to be alarming but enough to notice. Ethan was growing into a man, confident and attentive in ways that sometimes caught me off guard. I told myself it was natural, the closeness of a mother and son who had weathered challenges together. But some part of me knew there was more beneath the surface. As the hours ticked by, the house transformed into a winter wonderland. Garlands adorned the banister, twinkling lights framed the windows, and the tree stood tall and proud in the corner of the living room, its branches heavy with memories. "Done," Ethan declared, stepping back to admire the room. "What do you think?" "It's beautiful," I said, meaning it. "You've outdone yourself this year." His smile widened, his chest puffing slightly at the praise. "Only because I had the best partner." He moved closer, brushing a speck of glitter from my cheek. The touch was brief but lingering, his fingers warm against my skin. My heart fluttered unexpectedly. "Thanks for doing this with me," he said, his voice low. "It wouldn't be the same without you." The sincerity in his tone caught me off guard. I felt the weight of his gaze, heavy and unflinching, as if he was trying to tell me something without words. I swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. "Of course," I managed, forcing a smile. "It's our tradition." Ethan nodded, but his eyes didn't leave mine. For a moment, the air between us was charged, and I felt an unfamiliar tension knotting in my chest. I quickly turned away, pretending to adjust the garland on the mantel. Later that evening we sat on the couch, hot cocoa warming our hands as the tree lights blinked in a soft rhythm. The snow outside had turned into a blizzard, the wind howling against the windows. But inside it was cozy, the kind of night that made you forget the world outside. Ethan was quiet, his long legs stretched out in front of him, his head resting against the back of the couch. I caught him glancing at me from the corner of his eye, a soft smile playing on his lips. "What?" I asked, half laughing, half nervous. "Nothing," he said, his grin widening. "Just thinking how pretty you look tonight." I felt my cheeks flush, my stomach twisting in an unfamiliar way. "Ethan," I chided, laughing lightly to mask the flurry of emotions his words stirred. "Flattery will get you nowhere." "Not flattery," he said, his voice steady. "Just the truth." There was something in the way he said it, so sincere, so certain, that left me momentarily speechless. I looked away, focusing on the flames dancing in the fireplace. Ethan shifted closer, his arm brushing mine. The contact was warm and familiar, but it sent a shiver down my spine. I told myself it was the cold draft from the window, but deep down I knew better. "You work so hard," he said softly. You do so much for me. I don't think I've ever really thanked you for everything." His words were a balm to wounds I hadn't realized I still carried. My ex-husband's betrayal had left me doubting my worth, questioning if I was enough. But Ethan, with his steady presence and unwavering admiration, made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. "You don't have to thank me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You're my son. I'd do anything for you." He leaned forward, his dark eyes searching mine. "No. That's what makes you so amazing." The weight of his gaze was almost too much to bear. I stood abruptly, breaking the spell. "I think I'll head to bed," I said, my voice tight. "It's been a long day." Ethan stood too, his movements slow and deliberate. "Good night, Mom," he said, his voice soft. "Sleep well." I nodded, avoiding his eyes as I retreated upstairs. But as I closed my bedroom door behind me, I couldn't shake the feeling that our relationship was shifting, the boundaries blurring in ways I wasn't sure I was ready to face. The storm outside raged on, but inside, the tension simmered quietly, waiting for the moment it could no longer be ignored. The morning light filtered softly through the frost-covered windows, painting the kitchen in hues of gold. I stood at the counter, carefully laying out the ingredients for Ethan's favorite cupcakes: flour, sugar, eggs, and of course strawberry jam and cherries. "Mom," Ethan called, his voice carrying a teasing lilt as he entered the kitchen. "You're up early for someone who said she was exhausted last night." I turned, finding him leaning casually against the doorway, his arms crossed and a playful grin tugging at his lips. His hair was slightly disheveled, his eyes still soft with sleep. "Well, someone has to keep this house running," I quipped, my tone light. "And someone else begged for cupcakes last night." Ethan chuckled, stepping closer. "Begged? I believe I just gently requested." He rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms dusted with a light tan. "You're not doing this alone, though. I'm here to help." I raised an eyebrow. "Help? Or make a mess?" "Both," he said with a wink, pulling out a mixing bowl. We fell into an easy rhythm, the sounds of clinking bowls and the soft hum of holiday music filling the kitchen. Ethan teased me mercilessly as we worked, commenting on everything from my overly precise measuring to my insistence on wearing an apron. "You're like a scientist in here," he joked, watching me level off a cup of flour. "Where's the spontaneity?" "Spontaneity doesn't make perfect cupcakes," I countered, trying not to laugh. "But if you want to be spontaneous, you can start cleaning up as we go." He grinned, flour-dusted hands held up in mock surrender. "Now, where's the fun in that?" As I reached for the whisk, Ethan gently caught my wrist, his touch warm and firm. "Let me do that," he said, his voice softer now. I let him take over, watching as he whisked the batter with surprising skill. His movements were deliberate, confident, and there was something mesmerizing about the way he focused, a faint smile playing on his lips. "See," he said, glancing at me. "I can be precise too." "You're full of surprises," I admitted, shaking my head. He smirked. "Only for you, Mom." The words, playful as they were, sent a shiver down my spine. I busied myself with arranging the cupcake liners, trying to ignore the warmth rising in my cheeks. The cupcakes were cooling on the counter when Ethan brought over the cherries. "The crowning touch," he said, popping one into his mouth before I could stop him. "Ethan," I scolded, though I couldn't help but laugh. "We need those." "There are plenty," he said, grinning like a mischievous child. "But I have to say, I'm the real cherry on top here." "Oh, please," I groaned, rolling my eyes. "Don't quit your day job for stand-up comedy." As we finished decorating the cupcakes, Ethan turned to me, his expression suddenly serious. "Wait here," he said, disappearing into the living room. I watched him go, curious but slightly wary. He returned a moment later, holding a small pink velvet box tied with a delicate black ribbon. My breath caught at the sight. "What's this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan handed me the box, his dark eyes gleaming with something I couldn't quite place. "Open it and find out." I hesitated, my hands trembling slightly as I untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was the most exquisite piece of lingerie I had ever seen. Black lace, delicate and intricate, edged with soft ribbons. The fabric was sensual, luxurious, and utterly unexpected. I stared at it, my breath hitching. "Ethan," I managed, my voice faltering. What is this?" He leaned casually against the counter. His expression unreadable but his gaze steady. "I saw it the other day and thought of you," he said simply, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. "You deserve something beautiful." Words failed me as a flood of emotions swept through me. Surprise, confusion, a flicker of something I couldn't name. "Ethan, this is a gift," he interrupted, his voice firm but kind. "You work so hard and you never treat yourself. I wanted to do something for you. Something special." I looked up at him, searching his face for answers. His expression was sincere, but there was an intensity in his eyes that made my heart race. "Thank you," I said finally, my voice barely audible. "It's beautiful." "You're beautiful," he said. His words soft but deliberate. The way he looked at me, as if I were the only person in the world, left me breathless. I quickly closed the box, setting it down on the counter. "I should, finish cleaning up," I said, my voice shaky. Ethan reached out, gently catching my hand. "Mom," he said, his tone low and earnest. "You don't have to brush this off. It's okay to let someone appreciate you." His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. I nodded, unable to meet his gaze. "Thank you," I said again, my voice trembling. Ethan smiled softly, his thumb brushing over my knuckles before he let go. "Always," he said, turning back to the cupcakes as if nothing had happened. But everything had happened, and as I stood there, the pink velvet box still in my peripheral vision, I couldn't shake the feeling that our relationship had crossed into uncharted territory. Beautiful, terrifying, and utterly undeniable. The evening carried a quiet stillness, the kind that only a snowy winter night could bring. The Christmas tree twinkled softly in the corner of the living room, casting gentle patterns of light on the walls. But something tugged at the edges of my mind, the attic. I remembered the extra decorations we'd stored up there last year, things I hadn't brought down yet. "Ethan," I called, turning toward him where he sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone. "There are still some nice decorations in the attic. Could you help me get them?" He set his phone down immediately, a crooked grin lighting his face. "Anything for you, Mom." The attic ladder creaked faintly as Ethan unfolded it, steadying it against the opening in the ceiling. I gathered my courage, clutching the edge of the ladder. "I'll hold it," Ethan said firmly, standing close, his hands gripping the sides as if daring the ladder to even think about slipping. "You sure it's stable?" I asked, peering up at the dim attic above. "Trust me," he said, his voice steady. "I won't let anything happen to you." I began climbing, carefully testing each step. The wood groaned faintly beneath my weight, but Ethan held the ladder steady, his reassuring presence grounding me. Halfway there, he called up. "You're doing great." I couldn't help but laugh. "You sound like I'm scaling Mount Everest." "To me, you're the star climber," he teased, his voice warm with affection. Just as I reached for the attic floor, the house was plunged into sudden darkness. The lights blinked out, leaving us in the thick, suffocating quiet of a power outage. "Ethan," I called, my voice laced with uncertainty. "I'm here," he said immediately. "Don't move, Mom. I've got you." I froze, gripping the ladder tightly, unsure of my footing. The shadows felt deeper, the attic more treacherous without light. "I can't see where to go," I admitted, my voice trembling. "Don't worry," Ethan said, his tone calm and soothing. "I'll guide you down. Just trust me." I felt his hands gently wrap around my ankles, steadying me. "Slowly," he instructed. "One step at a time." I descended cautiously, each movement guided by his firm but gentle grip. His hands moved to my waist as I reached the last few steps, steadying me as I came down. "There you go," he murmured, his voice close. "Safe and sound." Before I could respond, he leaned in and pressed a soft kiss to my cheek. His touch was warm against the cold air, sending a shiver through me that I couldn't entirely blame on the winter chill. "Ethan," I began, but he cut me off, his voice low and almost tender. "I want to see my gift on you," he said, the words hanging in the air like an unspoken dare. His eyes searched mine, dark and intense, and my breath caught. I stepped back instinctively, trying to compose myself. "The power's out. I should check the breaker." He smiled faintly, his expression unreadable. "Sure," he said, stepping aside. "But think about what I said." I nodded, unable to meet his gaze as I turned away. My heart raced, my mind swirling with confusion and a flurry of emotions I couldn't fully name. The pink velvet box still sat on the counter, its presence impossible to ignore. As I flicked through the breaker switches, trying to restore the power, Ethan's words played over and over in my mind. His confidence, his certainty. It was disarming, intoxicating, and utterly bewildering. When the lights blinked back on, I let out a relieved breath, but the warmth of Ethan's kiss lingered, and his words echoed in my mind like a melody I couldn't silence. Returning to the kitchen, I found Ethan sitting at the table. His expression calm, but his eyes still holding that unspoken intensity. He looked up as I entered, his gaze locking onto mine. "The lights are back," I said, trying to sound casual. "Good," he replied, a faint smile playing on his lips. But I wasn't worried. I knew you'd fix it. There was something in the way he said it, an unwavering confidence in me that made my chest tighten. I busied myself with tidying up the counter, hoping to hide the flush that crept into my cheeks. "Mom," Ethan said, his voice soft but commanding enough to draw my attention. I turned to face him, my hands stilling. "Yes, about earlier." His expression softened, vulnerability flickering across his features. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I wanted you to know how much you mean to me." The sincerity in his voice disarmed me, and I felt a lump rise in my throat. "Ethan, you don't have to." "I do," he interrupted, standing and closing the distance between us. "You've given so much, and you never let yourself have anything in return. You deserve to feel special, to feel beautiful." He reached out, his hand brushing mine lightly. That's all I wanted to say. I looked up at him, my heart pounding in my chest. The air between us felt charged again, but this time it was gentler, quieter, a warmth that wrapped around us like a protective cocoon. "Thank you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan smiled, his gaze softening. "Anytime, Mom." With that, he stepped back, leaving me standing there, the pink velvet box still untouched on the counter and my thoughts spinning like a snowstorm outside.